I'll tell you a little bit about our school because it's a very, Puerto Rico, like any other place, there's a different experience depending on where you are. It's a small island. It's 100 miles long and then 30 miles wide. So it's a small little island, and we have two smaller islands that are off the shore, off the coast of our main island. And so for me, I was born and raised here. I have not lived here all my life. I moved out of Puerto Rico when I was for college, and then I went to college in the US in Boston, and then I lived in New York for a while, and then I came back to Puerto Rico in my 20s because I wanted to be home. And so the rest is sort of history. I've been teaching ever since here in Puerto Rico. So a typical day for me is going to school. That's where my life is. I have two kids who go to the same school that I teach at. Um, and, it's always beautiful and sunny and 75, 80 degrees. So it's actually pretty awesome, honestly, to spend the day here. I'm very excited that I live here. It's home for me. And my experience is very positive. But it's everywhere.
Right.
It's everywhere. Puerto Rico's a small place, and so there's not, there's some segregation, unintentional to an extent, but there's also the case, because there is such little space, and also because of some government policies about where they placed low income housing, like we're sort of intermingled, like if you guys would ever visit what are considered the touristy areas of Puerto Rico, in the metro area where the beach is pretty much everywhere, but in the like metro beach area, um, you know, on the same block, you can have a very fancy hotel, and then also some rundown buildings, but that's like anywhere else in the world,
Right.
I think. But um, so at the same time, I think after the hurricane, the situation became more acute. I think that, um, and also in the pandemic, because we've, of course, as you probably, I don't know if it's the same as in Iowa, but we've been on lockdown, I mean, for a year. Pretty much everybody is staying home. And so the economy has taken a big hit. So I think it just makes the divide between rich and poor just that much more divided, I guess. There's really, it's this is something that I guess is difficult to say, but there's no hiding from poverty. You know what I'm saying? It's like anywhere else in the world that has a high level of poverty, there's no escaping it, and it's something that worries me as a citizen of Puerto Rico, of the US here in Puerto Rico, and because I have kids, and I've been teaching for a long time, and I've taught a lot of kids, and I want to see them come back and have opportunities. And it's very difficult to for young people to want to come back, precisely in part because it's the economic situation in Puerto Rico has been, there has been an economic recession, arguably depression, for a lot of years now, prior to the 2008 start, when the US really had the first big wave of it. We had already been in a recession. Puerto Rico also has had a situation with debt, as you may know. I don't know if you guys have studied that, but so it's a very complex issue. It tentacles touch everything. It's children. It's the availability of resources. It's funding for public schools. It's funding for hospitals. It's when you have a high population of people who fall under the poverty line, then obviously the tax income that the place can get is different. It's difficult, it's a difficult and complex problem. I don't know. I have to say that um, as a history teacher, my instinct is to say that there are many causes, of course. Um, it's also kind of important that you understand the context of the island. Puerto Rico is a territory slash commonwealth slash colony of the United States. That has a massive impact on our economic potential and opportunity. There are very complex issues around that. And before Puerto Rico was a part of the US, we were a colony of Spain for a few hundred years. So ever since our indigenous population was wiped out, frankly, after European colonization, ever since then, we've been a colony. And so that is part of it. That's a huge part of it. That's not to say that it's any one country or it's nobody's fault, really. It's just something, it just is, Um, so it's a very complicated issue. I think status has something to do with it, but I also think that it has a lot to do with mismanagement, governmental mismanagement. We've had a history of some mismanagement in the government, some corrupt governments. The list goes on and on, honestly. Like I'm trying not to, I don't want you to think that, Puerto Rico is like any other place. It's a very vibrant and beautiful, and the people here are very welcoming and loving generally. But it's a place that has had a very complicated history, and that has certainly impacted our economic development. I think that moving forward, the first thing that needs to happen is that beyond status or anything like that is that we have to get our economics in order. We have to figure that out. And I think that that's something that would greatly positively impact the people who live under the poverty line in Puerto Rico. So right now, I think that the causes are very varied. But I certainly think that there's a way forward. I am an eternal optimist. I am hopeful that there are things that we can do to improve the conditions. And I see it every day. Like the thing about being poor or living in an area, in a country, in an island that's poor, is that there's a flip side to that, which is that you see a lot of people trying to make something out of nothing. And we do that as Puerto Ricans. We are good at sort of honestly rising from the ashes. And I think that the hurricane was a big wake-up call for a lot of us, especially people of my generation. I am 39, and there's a lot of people from my generation that are coming back now to the island to try to positively impact and start businesses and get people employed and just like work on it. I think that is really all we can do, because the causes are so complicated. And I think the solutions are complicated from a governmental point of view. But I think that there's also a lot that regular people who live above the poverty line can contribute. And I think that's what we try to do in our school. And I think that's why we have such an outreach program, and why we try to sort of, have tentacles everywhere and help out whenever we can, but also because it's our responsibility. That it has varied throughout the 100-year history. But I have to say that I think that the best thing that people can do to help Puerto Rico and improve that relationship, is let me finish the thought. The one thing that people can do is learn about us. I think that one of the things that people down here resent is that, or not resent, but maybe they are concerned about, especially we have a lot, as you probably know, we have a big, huge population of people who are from here, but move elsewhere into the mainland of the US. And so there's a huge expat population. We call them the diaspora of Puerto Ricans. So there's 7 million of us. Like there's only like 2.5 million that live on the island. Everybody else lives somewhere else. So we're a huge community, you know, and I think that we want to be seen, we want to be heard, we want to be understood. That I think that most people in Puerto Rico view the relationship with the US from a perspective of inevitability, in the sense that it is what it is. I think we've just sort of come to terms with it. It happened. We became a part of the US in 1898. Most of, I would think I can fairly say that most people in Puerto Rico wish Puerto Rico would become a state if they were to have to pick between an independent country or a state. So I think people view the relationship as generally positive, honestly. But the one thing that I think I could say is that we here in Puerto Rico, part of our national curriculum is US history, along with PR history. And I think that it would greatly help the relationship between people here and on the mainland, and also with the diaspora, is just learning about us and learning about who we are and what has, you know, what the island's been through, not just negative terms, but also like the, you know, just the sheer resilience, honestly, of our people is insane. Like I say that, and I'm completely 100% biased, but an argument can be made that really people here are just tremendous, and they have a tremendous hunger to help and to do good, I think. So so yeah, I think that would help, you know, if people would look, because I think when I went to college in Boston, a lot of my now friends, you know, who I met there didn't know anything about us. And that's not their fault necessarily. You know what I'm saying? If it's not taught, it's not taught. So I think education, of course, I'm a teacher, I would say that, but education is the key. I think we were probably on track to recover post hurricane, and I think the pandemic has really halted that progress. Yeah. I think there's a lot of people in Puerto Rico that have food insecurity. I think there's a lot of people in Puerto Rico who have lost their jobs, just like in the States. This has been a really, really rough year with the pandemic. So I am hopeful that we are doing a pretty good job of vaccinating our people. So I'm hopeful that soon we will be able to get back on the right path. But I certainly think the pandemic hasn't helped the recovery. I think Maria, the hurricane, devastated a massive amount of progress that we had made, because the hurricane just decimated, for example, our agricultural sector. We had been for years had diminishing agriculture, an agricultural sector, and then right before Maria, we were starting to turn around and more people were getting into agriculture, which is like a great thing to get into, particularly if you're an island and you have to feed yourselves. And Maria just destroyed our crops, among, of course, many other things. It destroyed our electric infrastructure. That was already horrible to begin with. It destroyed everything. The hurricane was just a force that I have seen many, I've witnessed and been through many hurricanes in my life, probably at least 4 before Maria, plus the one that happened the week prior, because we had 2 within a 2-week span. And Maria was just out of this world. It was just something that I'll never ever forget the noise of the wind. Like it was just insane. honestly.
That just really shows like the resilience you were talking about of Puerto Ricans, how you're able to experience something like that and then just be able to keep going because there's really no other option.
Yeah, I mean, we really, that you said it, you know, what are we going to do? So we have to get up and take one step at a time. I have a boss who, one of my bosses used to say, we're going to eat that elephant one bite at a time, you know, and I think that's, yeah, that's what we do. And we have done that historically. And we're going to continue to do it. I know we are, and we have to. But it's really the thing about, you know, growing up, now on the flip side, talking to you young ladies who are obviously very interested in, you know, in doing well or whatever with your classes. Um, it's the realization, part of growing up is realizing that nobody's going to come and save us. And that sounds really dark, but that's also really liberating, because it's like, okay, so we have to do it, and there are some people who are not in the position to do that, so it takes the rest of us to then really help and do something.
Yeah.
So I think it makes me hopeful. It makes me hopeful that I can actually, there are things that I can do that would make a difference, you know? So, I want to say a million things, but the truth is that, just keep doing what you're doing, you know, be curious about it, learn, listen. If you have friends, there probably are Puerto Ricans in Iowa, I'm sure. um, so, you know, if you have friends, ask them about it, ask them about, their families and their experience. And that really doesn't just go for PR, obviously, it goes for everybody. I think one thing we can do as a country or a group of people that are bound by citizenship, which is what I think is the case between Puerto Rico and the US. The best thing we can do is to listen to each other and to try to, you know, take each other's perspective. Because I know that there has been a lot of division for a lot of reasons, here, there, everywhere. There's controversy everywhere you look, right? So I think the best thing we can do is do what you guys are doing, which is reaching out, seeing if you asking questions, listening, and then learning, right? You know, looking stuff up and figuring out what the next step. I think that's really cool. I think that's great, because honestly, I was telling some of my colleagues, that I got an email from Iowa, and they were like, "What? How did you get an email from Iowa? Why are they studying PR? I love it, but like, why? I don't understand." And I was like, "Well, maybe they have a Puerto Rican teacher. You know, there are Puerto Ricans everywhere." That's literally what I said to my teacher friends. So I think that's great.
Touch with you, so I'll for sure send you his email.
Definitely do it, because I would love to talk to him some more, and then if we can hook you guys up with some students so you guys can chat, it would be great.